The transformative power of the cross, embracing suffering and illness as divine gifts, inspired by the teachings of Father Peter Mary Mermier. Dear brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ, we are here today not to escape pain, but to understand it, to reflect not just on the joy of our vocation, but on its trials and the mysterious redemptive grace hidden within them. Suffering, illness, and inner pain are not strangers to us. Whether in ministry or in silence, we all carry crosses. And yet, these are perhaps the most misunderstood aspects of our spiritual life. Father Peter Mermier, the holy founder of the missionaries of St. Francis de Sales and the Sisters of the Cross of Chavanot, did not avoid this theme. In fact, he embraced it. For him, the cross was not a cruel accident. It was a divine instrument, a gift. He believed that suffering, when accepted in faith, becomes a channel of grace and transformation. Through his own illnesses, anxieties, and spiritual struggles, he came to understand suffering not as a curse to be feared, but as a sacred invitation. He taught us to stop resisting our crosses and to kiss them. Today, we will explore how Father Mermier reframes suffering, illness, and pain as gifts meant not to break us, but to sanctify us. His message is clear. If embraced with faith and humility, suffering becomes the very place where we meet God most intimately. The first point for our reflection today is the cross, a path to healing and spiritual growth. First of all, embracing the cross with love and humility. For Father Mermier, the Christian life without the cross is unthinkable. He wrote, "Crosses are indispensable. They must be loved. They purify, they transform." He believed discipleship is not about avoiding suffering, but embracing it with love. The cross, when carried with humility, reshapes the soul. Suffering teaches us patience. It exposes our illusions of control. It deepens our compassion. It draws us into the sufferings of others and into the mystery of Christ's passion. Secondly, kissing the cross, not biting it. One of Father Mermier's most memorable metaphors is this: crosses are to be kissed, not bitten. And I add, kissing them brings healing. They become soft and one learns to love them. What a striking image. To bite the cross is to rebel, to complain, to resist. But to kiss it, that is, to accept it in love, to let it soften us, even sanctify us. When we kiss the cross, it does not disappear, but it becomes light, not because the pain vanishes, but because grace carries it. Thirdly, suffering as a divine gift and opportunity. Father Mermier went further. He urged us to see suffering not as misfortune, but as a gift, a uniquely tailored opportunity for holiness. He once wrote, "Worries and doubts are crosses, gifts of God. The field seems barren, but when cultivated patiently, it yields a rich harvest." He saw anxiety, confusion, and even spiritual dryness as God's tool for shaping us. When we carry these with patience and surrender, we begin to transform. To suffer in love is to participate in Christ's redemptive work. It is to join our little pain to His infinite mercy. Fourthly, the cross in daily life. For Father Mermier, the cross is not just cancer or catastrophe. It is also the small daily trials, a misunderstanding, a delayed answer, a tired body, a harsh word, a lonely night. He wrote, "Kiss your crosses, do not bite them. When you kiss them, you are cured. They become pleasant. We learn to love them." Here is his wisdom. Even in small sufferings, there is sanctifying grace. Fifthly, practical application. Let us embrace suffering with faith, trusting it leads to growth. Let us transform everyday struggles, not by eliminating them, but by loving through them. Let us find meaning in pain by seeing Christ within it. The second point for reflection today is illness, sickness, and pain, invitations to interiority and divine pedagogy. First of all, illness as a means of spiritual purification. Father Mermier was not writing theory, he lived it. Struck by illness several times, he reflected, "My illness has forced me to retire within myself. Blessed be the name of the Lord." For him, sickness was God's invitation to interior silence, a retreat of the soul. Illness detaches us from worldly concerns and teaches us our radical dependence on grace. He called it a divine pedagogy, God educating the soul through frailty. Secondly, finding meaning in suffering through Christ. He encouraged his converts to see suffering as a share in the suffering of Christ. In a letter to a sick priest, he wrote, "Providence has to make you go through trials, to form that new man in you which makes you like Jesus Christ." Even when bedridden, he wrote, "If we do even a little, but do it for God, it is enough." Thus, he taught us to measure holiness not by activity, but by the spirit of offering. Thirdly, the virtue of patience and joy. Suffering for Father Mermier demands patience, a virtue he believed grows best in pain. He wrote, "Interior sorrows are an excellent cross which we should carry in a spirit of resignation and even of joy." True joy is never without thorns and without sacrifices. This is Christian paradox. Joy can coexist with suffering when the soul is rooted in surrender. Fourthly, practical application. Accept illness as a sacred space of encounter with God. Find spiritual meaning in limitations and frailty. Support others with compassion, bearing their pain in solidarity. Third point for reflection today, suffering as a path to holiness, uniting with Christ's passion. First of all, suffering as necessary for holiness. Father Mermier did not idealize suffering, but he insisted it was essential for sanctity. He wrote, "It is not enough for you to have left everything. Other trials are necessary for the disciple of Christ. Accept then with confidence the chalice. Rejoice at being found worthy to suffer." He echoes the apostles who rejoiced in sharing Christ's sufferings. Pain for him was not punishment but a privilege. Secondly, the role of profound faith and trust. It takes great trust to see suffering as grace. But Mermier believed that every trial was personally permitted by God for our sanctification. He wrote, "In sharing Christ's chalice of bitterness, we find the principle and the fullness of virtue." He invites us not just to accept suffering, but to see it as the very path to becoming like Christ. Thirdly, participation in Christ's passion. Suffering is not solitary. When offered in union with Jesus, it becomes redemptive. He reminded his companions, We too must pass through suffering, otherwise, we shall never arrive at our destination. It was necessary for Christ to suffer and thus enter into his glory. This is our pattern. The cross leads to resurrection, death leads to life, pain leads to glory. Fourthly, practical application. Accept suffering as a means of transformation. Trust that God is present even when he feels silent. Offer your suffering for others, uniting it with Christ's redeeming passion. To conclude, the promise of healing and transformation. Let's have a recap of key teachings. Today, we have walked the road of suffering with Father Mermier as our guide. He has shown us that the cross is not a curse but a gift, that illness can become a school of the soul, that patience, surrender, and trust are not signs of weakness but signs of grace, a deeper union with Christ. When we embrace the cross, not with fear, but with love, we enter more deeply into the heart of Christ. Father Mermier's life was not free from suffering, but through suffering, he became Christ-like, a man of faith, humility, and compassion. A call to hope. And now we are called, each of us, to refrain our own sufferings not as burdens to be escaped, but as bridges to grace, to support our sick and suffering brothers and sisters with mercy and presence, to walk our own Calvary with courage, knowing that the empty tomb awaits. Let us then kiss our crosses. Let us walk the path of illness with faith and serenity. Let us find God not only in joy but in trial. And above all, let us remember those who suffer with Christ shall rise with Christ. Love Jesus.